Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sleepless Campfire. Tonight, we travel into the forgotten backroads of Montana, places where light fades, and what remains are stories that refuse to die. Across these mountains, forests, and empty valleys are accounts drawn from ranger reports, emergency dispatch logs, and archived broadcasts. Each one verified, recorded, and retold in their own words. The Montana wilderness spans over 93 million acres, a territory larger than many states. Within this vast expanse, park rangers serve as the first line of defense, the eyes and ears of civilization's edge. They are trained in survival, rescue, and wilderness navigation. They understand the land, its rhythms, and its dangers. Yet even the most experienced among them sometimes encounter phenomena that defy explanation. In the following accounts, we will examine 7 distress calls that were logged into official records, but never fully resolved. These are not tales of ordinary mishaps or routine rescues. These are transmissions that ended abruptly, encounters that left experienced professionals shaken, and mysteries that continue to haunt the Montana backcountry. The rangers you will hear about are real people. Their names have been changed to protect their privacy, but the events described are documented in official reports. Some of these cases remain open in the system today, filed away with notes like unexplained circumstances or inconclusive findings. What you are about to hear is not sensationalism. It is documentation, the cold quiet after the story ends. These are the SOS calls that continue to echo through the mountains long after the radio has gone silent. Now, let us begin with our first story. It was early September of 2018 when Ranger Daniel Hayes began his final patrol of the season at Glacier Peak. The 32-year-old had been with Montana State Parks for 6 years and knew these trails better than most. His assignment was simple. Check the remote weather station at the summit, verify the trail markers were intact before winter, and return to base before the first snow. The morning began unremarkably. Hayes logged his departure at 6:17 a.m., noting the temperature was 38 degrees with clear skies. He carried standard equipment: GPS tracker, satellite phone, first aid kit, and enough provisions for 3 days despite the planned overnight trip. The last person to see him was park receptionist Maria Jennings, who later recalled that Hayes seemed his usual self-focused, maybe a little tired from the season. At 10:42 a.m., Hayes made his first scheduled check-in via satellite phone. "Everything's normal here," he reported. "Saw some fresh grizzly tracks about 2 miles back, but nothing recent. Weather holding steady. Should reach the summit by early afternoon." The transmission was clear, lasting 42 seconds. The next communication came at 2:19 p.m. and lasted only 11 seconds. Hayes's voice was lower than usual, almost a whisper. "Something's not right here," he said. "The weather station is... Never mind. I'll call back in 10. The connection then cut abruptly. Though not due to signal loss, it was a sudden termination, as if someone had pressed the end button. Dispatch operator Susan Mitchell noted the unusual nature of the call in her log. "Ranger Hayes seemed distracted or possibly concerned about something," she wrote. "When I attempted to reconnect, the line was busy for approximately 3 minutes, then went directly to voicemail." The final transmission came at 3:07 p.m. It began as a standard SOS call, with Hayes reading his coordinates and stating he required immediate assistance. But 40 seconds into the call, his voice changed. "There's something moving out there," he whispered. "It's not an animal. I've seen every animal that walks these mountains, and this is different." Then came a sound that dispatch later described as a low, resonant hum, almost like a tuning fork. but with a frequency that seemed to vibrate through the transmission itself. The hum lasted approximately 17 seconds before Hayes spoke again, his voice now barely audible. "It knows I'm here. I don't think it means to harm me, but..." The transmission ended mid-sentence, replaced by 3 minutes of what sound analysts would later identify as structured silence, a complete absence of background noise, wind, or static that technicians deemed acoustically impossible in an outdoor setting. When the rescue team reached Hayes' coordinates at dawn the next day, they found his campsite intact. The tent was pitched correctly, his provisions were untouched, and his satellite phone lay on a rock beside his sleeping bag, fully charged and operational. There were no signs of struggle, no tracks besides Hayes' own, and no indication that anyone else had been there. What the team did find was unusual. The weather station Hayes had been sent to check was completely dismantled. Not damaged or destroyed, but systematically disassembled, with each component placed neatly on the ground in a circular pattern. In the center of this arrangement was a single, perfectly smooth stone that did not match any geological formation in the area. Search coordinator Frank Williams noted in his report, "The precision of the dismantling suggests either extensive technical knowledge or an inhuman level of patience. None of the screws or bolts were stripped, and each component was placed with deliberate care. I've never seen anything like it in 30 years of search and rescue." The most perplexing detail came from the GPS tracker Hayes wore. Its data showed that after his final call, he had walked exactly 1.7 miles north of his campsite, stopped for precisely 12 minutes, then proceeded another 0.3 miles before the signal terminated. The search team followed this path precisely, but found no footprints, no broken branches, and no sign that anyone had passed through that section of forest. The official search was called off after 7 days, with incident report GL 2018-0942 remaining active in the Montana State Park system. Daniel Hayes was never seen again. No body was ever recovered. No explanation was ever offered for the dismantled weather station or the strange transmission. 3 months later, a hiker discovered Hayes' park ranger badge pinned to a tree exactly 3.2 miles from where his campsite had been. The badge was positioned at eye level, facing east, as if deliberately placed as a marker. Forensic analysis found only Hayes' fingerprints on the badge, and no other evidence in the surrounding area. In the years since, other rangers patrolling Glacier Peak have occasionally reported experiencing brief moments of structured silence, sudden absences of natural sound that feel, as one ranger described it, like the forest is holding its breath. These reports remain unofficial, filed away as personal observations rather than documented incidents. The case of Daniel Hayes continues to be referenced in ranger training as an example of unexplained circumstances requiring protocol revision. But no protocol can explain what happened that September afternoon in the Montana wilderness, or why the forest fell silent just as a ranger's voice faded into the unknown. It was late October of 2019 when Ranger Sarah Mitchell drew the short straw for the final sweep of Bitterroot National Forest's remote western sector. At 47, Mitchell was approaching her 20th year with the Forest Service, a career marked by impeccable record-keeping and unflappable professionalism. Her assignment was straightforward: document winter readiness of the 3 most isolated fire lookout towers before the first snowfall made them inaccessible. Mitchell's partner for the mission was rookie ranger Tomas Rivera, barely 6 months out of training. The age and experience gap was significant, but Rivera had shown exceptional navigation skills and an encyclopedic knowledge of local flora that had impressed even the veteran rangers. The two set out from the Hamilton Ranger Station at dawn on October 28th, driving a modified 4 Hummer 4 as far as the unmaintained forest road would allow, before continuing on foot. Their first destination was Lookout Tower 7, a structure dating back to the 1930s that had been retrofitted with modern equipment, but retained its historic character. We made it to Tower 7 around 2 p.m., Rivera later recounted in his official statement. Sarah was checking the radio equipment while I documented the structural integrity. Everything seemed normal until I stepped outside to photograph the eastern support beams. Rivera's testimony describes what happened next in precise, measured terms. I heard what I thought was Sarah calling my name from inside the tower. The voice was hers, but softer than usual, almost like a whisper carried on the wind. I called back that I'd be right in, but there was no response. When I re-entered the tower, Sarah was standing by the window, looking west. She asked me if I had called her name. Mitchell herself reported the incident in her log entry that evening. Unexplained auditory phenomenon at Tower 7. Both Ranger Rivera and myself heard what we perceived as the other's voice calling our names. Weather conditions were calm with minimal wind. No explanation apparent. The two rangers chalked it up to the acoustic properties of the valley and continued with their tasks. By nightfall, they had set up camp in a small clearing approximately 2 miles from Tower 7, planning to continue to Tower 8 the following morning. The first distress call came at 11:47 p.m. Mitchell's voice, normally steady and measured, carried an edge of urgency that dispatch operator James Harris immediately noted. "We're hearing movement around our campsite," she reported. "Not animal movement. This is deliberate. Footsteps that stop when we shine a light in that direction, then resume from a different position." Harris logged the call and requested more details. "Are you certain it's not wildlife, Sarah?" he asked. "I've been doing this for 20 years, James," Mitchell responded. "I know the sound of a bear, a moose, a mountain lion. This is different. The footsteps are too regular, too measured. And there's something else, a sound like whispers, just at the edge of hearing." Rivera's voice then came over the transmission. "It's like multiple people talking just out of range. We can't make out words, but the cadence is human." Harris advised them to secure their campsite and maintain radio contact every 15 minutes. The next check-in came at 12:02 a.m., with Mitchell reporting that the sounds had ceased. "Everything's quiet now," she said. "Probably just our nerves playing tricks in the dark." But the third call, at 12:17 a.m., revealed something far more disturbing. Mitchell's voice was barely above a whisper. "They're calling our names, James. Both of us. The whispers are clearer now, saying things like, 'Come this way' and 'over here.' But when we look in that direction, there's nothing there." Rivera then took the radio. "The footsteps have started again, but they're not circling us anymore. They're moving west, toward Tower 8. It sounds like a group of people walking in formation, but there's no flashlights, no gear sounds, just the footsteps." At 12:32 a.m., Mitchell made a decision that would later be questioned in the official review. "We're going to follow them," she told dispatch. "Whatever this is, it's heading toward Tower 8, which is our next destination anyway. We'll maintain radio contact." Harris strongly advised against this course of action, noting that protocol dictated they remain at their secured location until daylight. Mitchell's response was uncharacteristically defiant. "Protocol doesn't cover whatever this is, James. There's something happening out here that needs to be documented." The transmission from 12:47 a.m. was the last coherent communication from Mitchell. "We're approximately half a mile from Tower 8, she reported. "The whispers have stopped, but the footsteps continue. They're not trying to hide anymore. There are at least, I don't know, 8 to 10 distinct patterns of movement. They're not carrying equipment, just walking. Rivera's voice then cut in, sounding alarmed. "Sarah, look. The tower lights are on. That's impossible. The power system was disabled for winter." The final transmission began at 1:03 a.m. and lasted only 23 seconds. Mitchell's voice was filled with what Harris later described as not fear, but profound confusion. "They're not people," she said. "They look like people from a distance, but up close, the proportions are wrong, and they're all identical. We're taking cover behind the ridge west of the tower." What followed was a series of disconnected sounds. What seemed to be Rivera shouting something indiscernible, a strange metallic clicking noise, and then 3 seconds of the same whispering voices that Mitchell had described earlier, now clear enough to be partially transcribed as "join us and stay with us." Then silence. The search party that set out at first light found the Rangers' abandoned campsite exactly as described in the radio calls. They followed the trail of disturbed vegetation to the ridge west of Tower 8, where they discovered Mitchell's dropped satellite phone and Rivera's flashlight, both still operational. The final GPS coordinates from Mitchell's phone placed her at the ridge, but no further signals were recorded. When the search team reached Tower 8, they found it exactly as Mitchell and Rivera had described. The power system, which had indeed been disabled for winter, was somehow operational, with all lights burning brightly. The door to the tower stood open, and inside, everything appeared normal except for the logbook. The most recent entry, written in Mitchell's distinctive handwriting, read, "They want us to stay. They say it's better here. No more cold, no more loneliness. They look like Rangers, but they're not. There's something else wearing Ranger uniforms. They don't breathe. Their eyes don't blink." The entry ended abruptly with a single, smeared word: "Coming." The official search was called off after 11 days due to deteriorating weather conditions. The incident report, BR 2019-1029, remains active in the Forest Service database, classified as unexplained disappearances of 2 personnel under unusual circumstances. In the 2 years since, 5 different Rangers have reported seeing figures matching Mitchell's description near Tower 8, figures that look like Rangers from a distance, but move with unnatural uniformity and never respond to calls or radio contact. These sightings are not officially documented, but have become part of the oral tradition among Bitterroot Forest personnel. What happened to Sarah Mitchell and Tomas Rivera on that October night remains unknown. The official explanation notes possible hallucination due to environmental factors, followed by disorientation and exposure. But those who have studied the case, including several retired Rangers familiar with the area, believe something else occurred that night, something that stepped out of the Montana wilderness and claimed 2 of its own. It was the last week of May 2020, when Ranger Marcus Webb began his tenure as the new seasonal supervisor for Flathead Lake State Park. The 29-year-old had transferred from Yellowstone, bringing with him a reputation for efficiency and a background in wildlife biology. His first assignment was to conduct a comprehensive assessment of all park facilities before the summer season began in earnest. Webb's routine for his first week was methodical. Each morning, he would drive the perimeter road that circled the lake, checking parking areas, boat launches, and hiking trailheads. He kept detailed logs of everything he observed, noting wildlife activity, visitor patterns, and any maintenance issues that required attention. On the evening of June 3rd, Webb was driving the remote eastern section of the Perimeter Road, a stretch that saw minimal traffic even during peak season. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the pavement. According to his later report, he was driving at approximately 25 miles per hour well below the posted limit. When he first noticed the anomaly, there was a vehicle ahead of me. Webb wrote in his official statement. A dark-colored pickup truck, similar to our park service vehicles, but with no markings. It was maintaining a steady speed of about 30 miles per hour. I didn't think much of it at first. Park employees sometimes use personal vehicles for after-hours checks. Webb continued to follow the truck for approximately 5 miles, maintaining a safe distance. As the road curved along the shoreline, the truck would periodically disappear behind outcroppings of rock, only to reappear at the next bend. It was during one of these brief disappearances that something strange happened. I rounded a corner where the truck should have been visible, Webb recounted, but it was gone. There were no turnoffs, no side roads, no places where a vehicle could have pulled over or turned around. I slowed down, thinking perhaps I had missed something. But the road was clear in both directions. Assuming the truck had somehow passed him without his notice, Webb continued his patrol. 10 minutes later, as he approached a narrow section of road with steep embankments on both sides, he saw the truck again, parked perpendicular across both lanes, as if deliberately blocking the road. I stopped about 50 yards back, Webb wrote. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, preparing to ask whoever it was to move their vehicle. As I approached, I noticed that the truck was running headlights on, engine audible, but there was no one inside. Webb circled the vehicle twice, finding it empty. The driver's side door was unlocked, with the keys still in the ignition. The truck was identical to the park service vehicles in make and model, but bore no license plates or identifying markings. Inside, on the passenger seat, was a single, unlabeled key on a plain metal ring. At 8:47 p.m., Webb radioed dispatch to report the abandoned vehicle. I found a suspicious truck blocking the East Perimeter Road near mile marker 17. He told operator Linda Chen. It appears to be one of our vehicles, but it's not in the system. No plates, no ID. It's running but empty. Chen logged the call and asked Webb to provide the vehicle identification number from the dashboard. That's the strange part, Webb responded. There's no VIN. The dashboard plate where it should be is just smooth metal. Same for the door jamb. Chen advised Webb to secure the scene and wait for backup, noting that a ranger from the nearby station would arrive within 30 minutes. Webb agreed and returned to his vehicle to wait. What happened next is documented in a series of increasingly frantic radio transmissions that began at 9:02 p.m. Dispatch, this is Ranger Webb. The truck is gone. Webb's voice was measured, but with an undercurrent of disbelief. I was sitting in my vehicle with eyes on the truck. Then I looked down to check my notes for maybe 10 seconds. When I looked up again, it had vanished. Chen asked if Webb had heard the vehicle start up or drive away. Negative, Webb replied. No engine sounds, no headlights, no movement. 1 second it was there, the next it wasn't. There's nowhere it could have gone. The road is blocked by rock formations on both sides, and the embankments are too steep for any vehicle to descend. At 9:18 p.m., Webb made another call, his voice now noticeably strained. Dispatch, I'm seeing something in the woods to the east of the road. Movement, multiple figures. They're not carrying flashlights, but I can see them against the skyline. Chen asked for a description. Human-shaped, Webb responded. But their movements are synchronized. They're all walking at the same pace, in the same direction, maintaining perfect spacing between them. I've never seen anything like it. The backup ranger, David Chen, no relation to the dispatcher, was still approximately 15 minutes away when Webb's next transmission came at 9:31 p.m. His voice was now barely controlled. They're on the road now, he reported. Walking toward me, There are at least 8 of them, maybe more. They're dressed like rangers, but the uniforms are wrong old style, like from 20 years ago. And they're not walking right. Chen asked what he meant by not walking right. Their movements are too smooth, Webb replied. No natural variation in stride, no arm swing. They're moving like computer animations of people walking. At 9:42 p.m., with backup still 5 minutes out, Webb's final transmission began. They're surrounding my vehicle, he said, his voice now trembling. They're not making any sound. They're just standing there, looking at me. Their faces, there's something wrong with their faces. The transmission continued for another 30 seconds, during which Webb could be heard breathing heavily. Then came a sound that dispatcher Chen later described as like 1,000 people whispering at once, but all saying the same thing. Join us. The final words captured were Webb's. The doors just unlocked by themselves. I can't stop my hand from reaching for the handle. Then silence. When Ranger David Chen arrived at 9:48 p.m., he found Webb's vehicle parked in the middle of the road, engine running, headlights on. The driver's side door was open, but Webb was nowhere in sight. The vehicle was undamaged, with no signs of struggle. Webb's service weapon, flashlight, and radio were all inside the vehicle, along with his clipboard and half-finished report. A thorough search of the area revealed no footprints besides Chen's own, no tracks, and no indication that anyone had been there recently. The mysterious truck that Webb had first reported was never found, nor was there any record of such a vehicle existing in the Park Service fleet. The official investigation concluded that Webb had likely experienced a psychological episode resulting from environmental stress and fatigue, followed by disorientation and wandering into the wilderness. This explanation, however, failed to account for several details: the locked vehicle that had apparently unlocked itself, the synchronized movement of the figures Webb described, or the collective whispering captured in the final seconds of his transmission. The case file FL 2020-0603 remains open in the Montana State Park System, classified as unexplained disappearance under unusual circumstances. Marcus Webb was never seen again, and no trace of him was ever found despite extensive search efforts. In the months that followed, 3 other rangers patrolling the same stretch of road reported similar experiences. Sightings of figures in outdated uniforms moving with unnatural precision, vehicles appearing and disappearing inexplicably, and instances of vehicle doors unlocking without apparent cause. These reports were officially logged as optical illusions and equipment malfunctions, but circulated informally among park personnel as warnings about the eastern section of Flathead Lake's Perimeter Road. What Marcus Webb encountered that June evening remains a mystery, but his final transmission continues to echo through the Montana Park Service, a reminder that some roads lead not just through wilderness, but to places beyond our understanding. It was mid-August of 2017 when Park Ranger Elena Rodriguez began her special assignment at Glacier National Park. The 35-year-old forensic anthropologist had been brought in to consult on a series of unusual discoveries in the remote Many-Glacier area, skeletal remains that showed signs of exposure but lacked any identification or personal effects. Rodriguez arrived at the Many-Glacier Ranger Station on August 15th, bringing with her specialized equipment for bone analysis and a reputation for meticulous investigation. Her initial assessment of the remains confirmed what local rangers had suspected. These were not recent deaths, but rather bodies that had been exposed to the elements for varying periods, ranging from 1 to 10 years. What puzzled Rodriguez was the distribution of the remains. They were all found within a 3-mile radius of Lake Sherburne, she later noted in her preliminary report, but in locations that made no logical sense. Some were partially embedded in rock formations, that showed no signs of erosion or disturbance. Others were discovered in shallow depressions that hadn't existed during previous surveys of the area. On August 18th, Rodriguez accompanied a team of rangers to a newly reported discovery site approximately 2 miles north of the lake. The remains were found in a small clearing, partially concealed by fallen leaves. What made this particular site unusual was the condition of the surrounding vegetation. The ground was disturbed in a perfect circle, Rodriguez wrote in her field notes, approximately 12 feet in diameter, with the remains at the center. But the vegetation within this circle showed signs of accelerated decay, while the plants just outside the circle were healthy and normal. I've never seen anything like it in natural decomposition processes. As the team began the careful process of documenting and collecting the remains, Rodriguez noticed something else unusual. The bones themselves had a strange quality, she noted. They were almost translucent in certain light, with a faint bluish tint that I couldn't identify. And they were surprisingly light for their size, as if somehow less dense than normal bone tissue. That evening, back at the ranger station, Rodriguez began her preliminary analysis. As she worked under the specialized lighting in her mobile lab, she experienced what she would later describe as a moment of profound disorientation. I was examining a fragment of femur bone, she recounted in her official statement, when I noticed something in its reflective surface. At first, I thought it was just the lab lights creating an unusual pattern. But as I adjusted the angle, I realized I was seeing an image, a clear, detailed reflection of a landscape that wasn't the lab or anything I recognized. Rodriguez described the reflected scene as a vast, empty plain under a sky with 2 moons. As she continued to observe, she saw figures moving in the reflection, tall, slender beings that moved with an unnatural fluidity. They weren't human, she stated firmly. The proportions were wrong, the movements too smooth. And they seemed to be aware of my observation, occasionally turning toward where I would have been, as if they could see me through the bone fragment. Shaken by the experience, Rodriguez sealed the bone fragment in an evidence bag and decided to take a break. She stepped outside the ranger station, noting that it was 11:47 p.m. The night was clear and unusually still, with no wind or wildlife sounds. As she stood on the porch, she noticed a faint pulsing light coming from the direction of Lake Sherburne. Against her better judgment, Rodriguez decided to investigate. She grabbed her flashlight and satellite phone, informing the duty officer that she was taking a short walk to clear her head. The officer logged her departure at 11:53 p.m. What happened next is reconstructed from Rodriguez's garbled emergency call, received at 12:18 a.m., and the subsequent discovery of her abandoned equipment. "The light is coming from the lake," Rodriguez's voice transmitted, breathless and urgent. "It's not a boat or a vehicle. It's pulsing, blue-white. And there's a sound now, like chanting, but not human. It's coming from multiple points around the shoreline." The duty officer, Ranger Michael Torres, asked for clarification. "Are you certain it's not other campers or park visitors, Elena?" "Negative," Rodriguez responded. "There's no one here. I'm at the western shore now, and the light seems to be emanating from the water itself. It's creating patterns on the surface, geometric shapes that form and dissolve. And the chanting, it's synchronized with the light pulses." Torres advised Rodriguez to return to the station immediately, noting that her current location was in an area known for sudden weather changes and treacherous terrain. Rodriguez agreed, but her next transmission at 12:24 a.m. revealed that something had changed. "I can't leave," she said, her voice strangely calm. "They're showing me something, in the reflections on the water. I can see what happened to the people whose remains we found. They didn't die here. They came through. From somewhere else. Torres asked what she meant by came through. The lake is a gateway, Rodriguez explained. Not always, just at certain times. When the alignment is right, the people we found, they crossed over, but they couldn't survive in our atmosphere. Their bodies, they changed, became less dense, almost translucent. At 12:31 a.m., Rodriguez's transmission became fragmented. They're inviting me to see more, she said. Not with words, but with images in the reflections. They want me to understand. They're not hostile. They're curious about us, about our world, about what it's like to have solid form. Torres could hear the strange chanting sound in the background of the transmission, growing clearer and more distinct. Elena, you need to get back to the station now, he insisted. Whatever you're experiencing, it's not safe. I don't think they mean harm, Rodriguez replied, her voice now distant. But their presence, it changes things. The air feels different here, thinner somehow, and my reflection in the water, it's not quite right anymore. The proportions are off. The final transmission began at 12:38 a.m. and lasted only 17 seconds. I understand now, Rodriguez said, her voice filled with what Torres later described as scientific wonder rather than fear. The remains we found weren't the ones who couldn't adapt. They were the ones who chose to stay, to become something in between, a bridge between worlds. I think I want to see what's on the other side. Then the line went dead. When the search team reached the western shore of Lake Sherburne at dawn, they found Rodriguez's satellite phone, flashlight, and field notebook lying on a rock near the water's edge. Her footprints led to the water's edge, then disappeared. There were no signs of struggle, no indication that she had been dragged or forced into the water. It appeared as if she had walked into the lake of her own volition. The most puzzling discovery was her field notebook, open to a page filled with frantic sketches and equations. The final entry, written in a hand that seemed to become progressively less controlled, read, "The bone fragments weren't remains. They were records, like data storage, but biological. The reflections aren't just images, they're communication. The density reduction isn't decomposition, it's adaptation. Our physical form is just one possibility among many." The search for Elena Rodriguez was officially called off after 14 days. The incident report GL 2017-0819 remains active in the National Park Service database, classified as presumed drowning with possible psychological factors contributing to irrational behavior. In the years since, several other researchers and rangers working in the Many Glacier area have reported unusual phenomena. Reflections that don't match the surrounding landscape. Translucent bone fragments that seem to absorb light rather than reflect it. And instances of geometric light patterns on the surface of Lake Sherburne during unusually calm nights. These reports are not officially documented, but have become part of the unofficial knowledge base among those who work in that section of Glacier National Park. The skeletal remains that Rodriguez was investigating have been transferred to a secure research facility, where they continue to exhibit properties that defy conventional scientific explanation. What Elena Rodriguez encountered that August night remains a subject of speculation and debate, but her final words suggest that she didn't see her disappearance as an end, but rather as a transition, a journey into a realm where the boundaries between reflection and reality, between here and there, between life and something else entirely, had grown thin enough to cross. It was early July of 2021 when Ranger Benjamin Clark arrived at the remote Kintla Lake Ranger Station for what should have been a routine 3-month assignment. The 41-year-old former military communications specialist had been with the National Park Service for 8 years, earning a reputation for technical expertise. The Kintla Lake Station, located in the far northwest corner of Glacier National Park, was one of the most isolated postings in the system. The only other personnel in the area were 2 wildlife researchers, Dr. Amanda Reed and her assistant Marcus Wu, studying grizzly bear populations approximately 5 miles to the east. Clark's first 2 weeks passed uneventfully until July 19th, when he noted an unusual atmospheric phenomenon in his log. Persistent temperature inversion creating unusual acoustics, sounds carrying unusually long distances with minimal distortion. The following day, while performing maintenance on the station's radio antenna, Clark detected something unexpected. "I'm picking up a secondary signal on the emergency frequency," he radioed headquarters. "It's extremely faint, almost below the threshold of detection. It doesn't match any known transmission pattern in our system." Over the next 48 hours, the mysterious transmission grew progressively stronger and more complex. The signal now consists of 3 distinct harmonic layers, Clark logged. The base layer repeats every 17.3 seconds. The second layer modulates in a Fibonacci sequence. The third layer, I can't even describe the mathematical properties. By July 22nd, the signal was audible without equipment enhancement. "It sounds like bells, but not like any bells I've ever heard," Clark reported. "The tones are too pure, too precise, and there's something else, a faint vocal component beneath the harmonics." That evening, Clark contacted the wildlife researchers. "We've been hearing it too," Reed responded. "The bears we're tracking have all moved to higher elevations, and they're exhibiting behaviors we've never seen before. Gathering in groups, facing the same direction, as if they're listening to something." The next day, Clark logged more urgent developments. The signal has changed. The harmonic patterns are now accompanied by visual phenomena. Pulsing lights visible on the northern horizon, synchronized with the audio components. At 3:47 p.m., Clark received an urgent transmission from Dr. Reed. "We've managed to isolate the vocal component of the signal," she said. "When we slowed it down by a factor of approximately 100, we found something incredible. It's language, but nothing like any human language we've ever studied. And Ben, it's talking about us, about our world, our biology, our technology." That evening, the phenomenon escalated further. "The signal has become directional," Clark logged. "It's no longer emanating from the north, but appears to be focused on this station." At 9:32 p.m., Clark received his final transmission from Dr. Reed. "Ben, the bears are gone, all of them. And the signal, it's not just observing anymore. It's inviting. We're heading your way." The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by the harmonic signal with a new component, what sounded like human voices, distorted and layered into the mathematical patterns. What happened next is reconstructed from Clark's final audio transmission, beginning at 11:47 p.m. "The signal is now inside the station," he reported. "The harmonics are creating physical vibrations in the air. I can see patterns forming in the dust, geometric shapes that shouldn't be possible." "The lights are visible inside now," Clark continued. "Pulsing spheres of blue-white light, moving in synchronized patterns. They don't cast shadows. They just are." "There's someone at the door," Clark's voice resumed, now strained. "It's Dr. Reed and Mr. Wu, but they're different. Their movements are too precise, too synchronized. And they're not alone." The transmission continued for another 10 minutes, with Clark describing what he was experiencing in increasingly technical terms. "They're showing me the mathematics of their existence. the physics of multiple realities coexisting in the same space. The final 2 minutes of the transmission contained what would become the most debated portion of Clark's message. "They're offering a choice," he said. "To remain as I am, limited to 3 dimensions and linear time, or to expand my consciousness to include their reality. They say it's not death, but transformation." The transmission ended with Clark's final words. "I choose to understand." When the research team arrived 3 days later, they found the station doors open, all equipment operational, and no sign of struggle. On the main communications console, a complex mathematical equation was displayed, what physicists later identified as a theoretical framework for multidimensional consciousness. Beside the console, Clark's service weapon lay disassembled, with each component arranged in a precise geometric pattern. Outside the station, they found tracks that began abruptly at the edge of the clearing, as if the individuals had materialized out of thin air. The most significant discovery was a series of symbols etched into the surface of the main desk symbols that formed a message roughly translated as, "We have invited your colleagues to witness a broader reality. They have accepted. Understanding continues." The incident file KL 2021-0723 remains active in the National Park Service database, classified as unexplained disappearances of 3 personnel under extraordinary circumstances. No trace of Clark, Reed, or Wu was ever found despite extensive search efforts. What Benjamin Clark encountered that July night continues to be the subject of speculation. But his final transmission suggests that he didn't see his disappearance as an end, but rather as a beginning, an expansion of awareness beyond the limitations of human perception, into a reality where mathematics and consciousness merge into a single, unified understanding. It was late September of 2016 when Ranger Jacob Thorne began what should have been a routine 3-day patrol through the remote northeastern section of Yellowstone National Park. The 38-year-old former wildlife biologist had been with the National Park Service for 12 years, spending the last 5 in Yellowstone's backcountry. Thorne's assignment was to check several remote wildlife monitoring stations in the seldom-visited Lamar Valley region. The first day passed uneventfully, but Thorne noted in his personal journal a persistent feeling of being watched. "It's not the usual awareness you develop in predator country," he later transmitted. "This is different, more persistent, more intelligent." The following morning, Thorne discovered unusual tracks near a monitoring station. "They're bipedal, but the stride length is approximately 7 feet, he noted. "The pressure distribution suggests a weight of at least 300 pounds, but the depth of impression is inconsistent with that mass." At the monitoring station, Thorne found something even more puzzling. The camera trap had been triggered repeatedly during the night, but when he reviewed the images, they showed nothing but empty landscape. As he worked, he became aware of a sound that was too regular, too structured to be natural. "It's like whistling," he later transmitted, "but not like any human whistling I've ever heard. The notes are too pure, too sustained. And there's a harmonic quality to it, multiple notes sounding simultaneously in perfect mathematical relationship." What happened next is reconstructed from Thorne's emergency transmissions, beginning at 7:42 p.m. that evening. The whistling sound has returned. It's closer now, and I can see lights in the distance to the north. More like pulsing orbs of blue-white light moving in synchronized patterns. By 9:03 p.m., the situation had escalated. "They're here now," he transmitted. "I can see them against the skyline. Tall figures, at least 8 feet tall, but impossibly thin. They move with a fluidity that's not human." At 10:28 p.m., Thorne made a decision that would later be questioned in the official investigation. "I'm going to approach them," he told Duty Officer Maria Ramirez. "They're not showing any signs of hostility. In fact, there's something about their posture that suggests curiosity rather than threat." The final transmission began at 11:03 p.m. and lasted only 31 seconds. "They're offering me a choice," Thorne said. "To remain as I am, limited to three-dimensional perception, or to expand my awareness to include their reality. They say it's not death, but transformation." There was a pause of approximately 15 seconds, during which only the faint whistling could be heard. Then Thorne's final words: "I have to see. I have to understand." When the search team reached Thorne's campsite at dawn, they found it exactly as he had described. The tent was pitched correctly, his equipment was arranged neatly, and his field journal lay open on a rock beside his sleeping bag. There were no signs of struggle, no tracks besides Thorne's own, and no indication that anyone else had been there. The camera trap that Thorne had checked earlier was now positioned differently, aimed directly at the center of the clearing. The last image captured showed Thorne standing in the center of the clearing, his arms outstretched. Surrounding him were 6 tall, slender figures that appeared to be composed of light rather than solid matter. In the photograph, Thorne himself appeared to be simultaneously solid and translucent, as if in the process of transforming from one state of being to another. The official search was called off after 10 days. The incident report, YS 2016-0929, remains active in the National Park Service database, classified as unexplained disappearance under extraordinary circumstances. Jacob Thorne was never seen again, and no trace of him was ever found despite extensive search efforts. What Jacob Thorne encountered that September night remains a mystery, but his final transmission suggests that he didn't see his disappearance as an end, but rather as a transition, a journey into a realm where the boundaries between observer and observed, between 3 dimensions and many, between here and there, had grown permeable enough to cross. It was early June of 2022 when Ranger Michael Chen began his solo assignment in the remote Canyon Creek area of Lewis and Clark National Forest. The 26-year-old was the newest member of the Forest Service team, with an impressive background in wilderness survival and environmental science. His assignment was to conduct a comprehensive wildlife survey in preparation for a proposed expansion of hiking trails. The first 2 days passed according to plan. Chen established his camp in a small meadow approximately 3 miles from the nearest road and began his systematic documentation of the area. On June 7th, he noted something unusual in his log. Discovered what appears to be an abandoned structure approximately 1.2 miles northeast of camp. Not a cabin or shelter, but more like a platform or foundation approximately 20 feet by 30 feet, constructed with precision that suggests artificial origin. The following day, Chen returned to examine the structure more closely. The materials appear to be stone, but they're joined with a precision that suggests advanced tools, he wrote. The structure appears to be aligned with astronomical features, but not in a way that matches known indigenous construction patterns. That evening, Chen radioed his supervisor, Ranger Sarah Mitchell, reporting his discovery. "I found something out here that doesn't fit any known historical or contemporary construction patterns," he said. "The precision is extraordinary, and the astronomical alignment doesn't match anything in our records." What happened next is reconstructed from Chen's emergency transmissions, beginning at 9:47 p.m. on June 8th. "I'm hearing unusual sounds near my campsite," he reported. "More like tones, pure musical notes that seem to emanate from multiple directions simultaneously." At 10:23 p.m., Chen made another call. "The lights have started now," he said. geometric patterns of light appearing in the air between the trees, blue-white, pulsing in rhythm with the tones. By 11:02 p.m., the situation had escalated. "They're here now," Chen transmitted. Tall figures, at least 8 feet tall, but composed of what looks like condensed light rather than solid matter. "They're moving toward the structure I discovered earlier." At 12:17 a.m., Chen made a decision that would later be questioned in the official investigation. "I'm going to approach them," he told Mitchell. "They're not showing any signs of hostility. In fact, there's something about their posture that suggests invitation rather than threat." The final transmission began at 1:08 a.m. and lasted only 24 seconds. "They're offering me a choice," Chen said. "To remain as I am, limited to three-dimensional perception, or to expand my awareness to include their reality. They say it's not death, but transformation." There was a pause of approximately 10 seconds, during which only the faint harmonic tones could be heard. Then Chen's final words: "I have to see, I have to understand." When the search team reached Chen's campsite at dawn, they found it exactly as he had described. The tent was pitched correctly, his equipment was arranged neatly, and his field journal lay open on a rock beside his sleeping bag. There were no signs of struggle, no tracks besides Chen's own, and no indication that anyone else had been there. The structure that Chen had discovered was still there, but it had changed. The stones now emitted a faint blue-white glow, and the geometric patterns that Chen had described were still visible, pulsing slowly as if the structure was still processing some form of energy. The most puzzling discovery was Chen's camera, positioned on a tripod facing the structure. The last image captured showed Chen standing in front of the structure, his arms outstretched. Surrounding the structure were several tall, slender figures that appeared to be composed of light rather than solid matter. In the photograph, Chen himself appeared to be simultaneously solid and translucent, as if in the process of transforming from one state of being to another. The official search was called off after 8 days. The incident report LC 2022-06119 remains active in the Forest Service database, classified as unexplained disappearance under extraordinary circumstances. Michael Chen was never seen again, and no trace of him was ever found, despite extensive search efforts. What Michael Chen encountered that June night remains a mystery, but his final transmission suggests that he didn't see his disappearance as an end, but rather as a transition, a journey into a realm where the boundaries between observer and observed, between 3 dimensions and many, between here and there, had grown permeable enough to cross. The American landscape remains vast and unknowable. Across the millions of acres of wilderness that stretch from the Canadian border to the Wyoming line, there are places where the rules of our reality seem to bend. The stories we have heard tonight are not about fear, but about documentation, the cold quiet after the story ends. They are about the moments when the trained observer, the professional sent to maintain order in the wild, becomes the observed. What lingers after the final radio transmission is not the image of a monster or a specter, but the profound silence that follows a mystery with no solution. It is the quiet unease of a perfectly arranged campsite with no ranger to return to it. It is the cold realization that some doorways, once opened, cannot be closed. These rangers went into the wilderness to do a job, but they found something else instead. They found a question so vast that the only way to pursue the answer was to become part of it. Their voices continue to echo in the static of forgotten frequencies. Their footprints fade into the Montana soil, and the silence they left behind is deeper than any ordinary absence of sound. It is a silence filled with presence, with the weight of a question that has no answer in our language. The objects they left behind are not clues to be solved, but testaments to a choice made at the edge of understanding. These are the stories that the wilderness keeps, the files that remain open not because of oversight, but because there is no conclusion to file. They are reminders that beneath the beauty of the mountains and forests, there are currents we cannot see, patterns we cannot comprehend, and intelligence